it all comes back to knowing what you're doing. So I think from a manufacturer, from, an industry standpoint, we need to do a much better job on how do we kind of teach the next generation, but also the generation that's out there that have done things the same way.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast, our regular discussion with building industry professionals. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Tara Murray, Director of Marketing for Benjamin Obdyke. You can find the Fine Homebuilding Pro Talk podcast and the original Fine Homebuilding podcast at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. You can leave feedback and ask questions there too. Tara, it is such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for doing this.
Patrick, it's such an honor to be with you guys today.
Is honor the right word? I don't know. Anyway.
honor is definitely the right word. I'm a super nerd when it comes to the podcast. So I couldn't believe I got your email. It's a true honor.
I'm delighted to have you on here. I've spoken to you in the past and it's always enjoyable. So we're going to have a good time. I guarantee it.
Awesome.
So are you healthy, family healthy? Everything okay there?
Yeah, we're good. We're just kind of staying grateful. COVID hasn't personally touched our family, or thankfully the Obdyke family as well. We've all been safe and healthy. So it's just trying to figure out the new normal, as everybody likes to say. But I think overall we're doing the right stuff and keeping everybody healthy.
What challenges has the outbreak brought to the business world for you?
Yeah, it's been interesting because we've gotten the violent shove into remote work and making sure everybody can do that. So we've upgraded phone systems. But even from a customer standpoint, we're doing things like virtual job site training, whereas, our technical innovation manager would typically jump on a plane and go out to a job site. And he's got body cams now. He's got the full setup. And I think that's a change that will actually hang on to that, rather than sending people all over. This virtual job site thing has been fantastic. Keep Kaylin from, jumping on planes all the time. But I think, for better or for worse, the technology we've had to certainly upgrade. But in general, we feel like we've been able to keep chugging along. The building industry seems to keep chugging along. Yeah. So we've been trying to keep up with the business that's out there and everyone else trying to figure this out too.
Are your customers accepting of, virtual trainings versus in person? Is that working out for them?
It's working really well for them. It was definitely met with some skepticism for sure, right? It's uncomfortable. This is new. But what we're finding is that if we can overcome that initial skepticism and also provide the recording of that virtual job site training, that's something that they can put in front of every subcontractor that they have. So if we're walking through a tricky window detail or, a certain layering of a wall, and this is typically the larger projects, that general contractor can get that in front of every sub. And, even the most skeptical one that we've had so far has been really excited and I think just kind of surprised on how maybe this is something that we can do more of, and it's more valuable than having somebody here for one day and then that's it.
Right. Yeah, because they can have their employees watch it on their own time or before they start the project or whatever. It seems like a good thing. Can you tell us a little bit about Benjamin Obdyke and the products you make? And then what do you do there? But let's first start with what the company makes.
Sure. So Benjamin Obdyke, we've been basically in moisture management for 150 plus years. So since 1868, Benjamin Obdyke, the name that no one can say correctly, he was the inventor of the corrugated downspout. So the very first downspout that was able to contract and expand to avoid freezing and splitting. So that's really where our sort of sense of innovation comes from, is that product improvement. And we've done a lot of different things over the 150 years. So we no longer are in gutters and downspouts, but that was the core of the business until the late 1990s. And then, we started doing things like cedar breather, roofing underlayment, identifying a need on the roofing side, as roofing switched from sort of open slat, cedar roofs, and we started going right to deck. started seeing a need for something like cedar breather. And then that kind of launched us into some other product categories like ridge ventilation, house
So I
wrap.
was under the impression that the ridge ventilation came first, but it was
The,
actually
ri- the ridge ventilation came first. You're right. You're right.
and
Yeah.
that I presume someone figured out that you could take those matrix products and put them under cedar shingles.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. And that came from a contractor. I mean, that was somebody who was like, oh, I think I'm going to cut this roll vent stuff down. I could put it under cedar. And, we got wind of that. We're like, oh, there's really something here. So most of our products have been, not necessarily a disruptive technology. Like we haven't created something that nobody even knew that they needed. We've historically really relied on the installers' feedback is to come up with, okay, well, how do we come up with this better solution? So somebody at our organization he's getting ready to retire, he calls it coming up with a better mousetrap. So we don't create the mousetrap, but we improve on the said mousetrap and make it something that really creates value and solves the problem.
one thing you and I have talked about in the past is WRBs. When did your company enter that very busy marketplace?
Yeah, so our first entree into WRBs was right around the time that I started with Benjamin Obdyke. So that was 2011. So I've been with the company for almost 10 years now. And that was HydroGap. That was drainable house wrap technology. So, we didn't invent that category of drainable house wrap. There were some that were out there, but we felt like we were improving on the technology. There wasn't many out there that made a lot of sense in terms of, providing true drainage. So that was something that we saw the opportunity and decided to put all of our R&D horses behind developing a true drainage space technology for WRBs, and HydroGap was born.
So what exactly does a director of marketing do? What is that job?
What is that job? Well, at Benjamin Obdyke, it's a lot of hats. So it's developing the marketing strategy for the company, and also making sure that that's executed. So I have a team, but technical support also reports into marketing. So that reports into me as well. And I also wear a little bit of a culture hat. So every leader at Benjamin Obdyke, so all of the leadership team seats, we all have a responsibility to help drive the culture, make sure that we're talking about our values and hiring and firing around those values.
And are there similar positions at other building products companies? And do they generally do the same thing?
Yeah, I would say, having been at one other building products company, the director of marketing position, it's generally something that a manufacturer would have. I would say it's probably more specific to pure marketing strategy, probably communication, sales support heavy as you look at sort of a larger organization. Certainly, not technical support and some of the other things that I have my hands in at Benjamin Obdyke.
Are there actually folks at Benjamin Obdyke who are answering the phones for technical questions, or is that handled elsewhere?
No, so it's real Obdyke employees. That's something that, again, as we talk about our culture and sort of who we are as Benjamin Obdyke, we try to talk a lot about, you get to a person. So not only do we have a technical support team, but our inside sales customer service team is trained as well. We try to have a general level of knowledge when it comes to our products for anyone who's picking up the phone. So you might even get somebody from our HR department that can answer a question on how many square feet are on the roll of slicker, or can I install HydroGap in addition to slicker? Like those basics, we spend a lot of time on internal training, and that goes across the organization. Everyone is encouraged to attend those internal trainings and know just the basics about what we do.
So when you passed folks in the hallways pre-COVID, would you quiz them on how many square feet of coverage you get in a roll of home slicker?
I would only do that to our director of sales because he's new and he drives me crazy with that stuff. And I'm like, so what's the name of these products? How many square feet are on this roll? So I drive him totally crazy. But that's usually a relationship with sales and marketing. We keep each other in check.
Sure. I'm going to go on a limb and say only recently are makers of building envelope products starting to make things that are meant to work together. Their compatibility is tested. Not too long ago, builders and remodelers had to figure this stuff out themselves. Why has it taken the building products industry so long to start making things that are meant to work together?
That's a great question, and I love that question, and I struggled with, when I saw it on the list, I was like, oh, that's a really good one, and I feel like I don't feel as able to answer it from a Benjamin Obdyke perspective, because I think we've always had that, listening to the contractor, and that's part of how we differentiate ourselves, and that we're trying to be listening, understanding, and as a resource. And as a smaller player, we've always had to direct people to other companies, right? We've
Hmm.
always been in accessories. So even with ridge ventilation, we don't make shingles. So we have to know what all the shingle manufacturers are saying and doing so that we're steering people to the right information or to a different product if we're not the right one. I mean, we do that all the time. So I think part of the reason that some manufacturers struggle with it is the I would say that the lack of interest or lack of interest in partnering. I'll say that. So, if we don't make it, then we want to sell what we make, and that's it. So we don't want to talk about anybody else's brand or necessarily present ourselves as experts on anybody else's products. We just feel like that's short sighted for the level of building professional that we deal with. There's we don't provide everything that you could have on your house. So we need to be knowledgeable in how to direct these installers on what to use and what not to use. And one of our goals is to kind of move people along a spectrum of building better. So kind of meeting people where they are in their own process of figuring things out, and let's help give them knowledge to move them up the spectrum of building better is something that we really strive to do. And that requires us to be very informed on other products.
So do you go out and actually talk to, or did you talk to people on the job site to see where they are with regard to doing stuff correctly? Is that part of the mission of the company?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, from our technical support team, but also our field salespeople, we have a weekly meeting trying to get insight from the field. Like last job site you were on, what are people struggling with? Is there an opportunity for a better, sill solution, a better way to, create an air barrier? What are people really struggling with that seems to pop up and pop up? And that really just that's what drives our innovation pipeline, is trying to get those key insights from our building professionals on the needs, and then try to provide a solution for those needs.
I've observed that companies that do that, who ask their customers what they want and then deliver that, it seems like a shrewd business proposition, right? Let them figure it out and make it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, and I think I mean, it's a constant challenge to keep a discipline around pulling market insight from the field, to making sure that we're training our people on how to ask the right questions. I mean, that's something that it can be really hard to pull out that information from the field, but it's one of our values. It's one of the things that we pride ourselves on, and also the other thing that we really look to do is build longer term relationships with our end users. So, if somebody calls and, we end up pointing them to a product that we don't have, or it makes more sense for their application, hopefully they'll remember that and come back to us when it does make sense to use an Obdyke product. So long term relationships and trying to involve those customers in the product development process is something that we're really proud of, but it takes a lot of work too.
I bet. I think you'd agree that professionals in the residential building industry are very conservative when it comes to adopting new products or techniques. Where do you think this resistance comes from? And I bet that presents a challenge for your job.
Absolutely. That is, you hit the nail on the head. That is my ultimate challenge. So I think no one wants to be the guinea pig, right? Nobody wants to be the first one using a new product when it's not tested in the field. And I think part of that hesitation also comes from the fact that some of the testing standards that we have for performance characteristics, I'll use house wrap as an example. As we look at ASTM testing, a lot of those tests are lab
Bogus.
tests, right? Right. They're flawed in, just the nature of that they're in a lab and they're not, outside. And sometimes it's really hard to get testing on something like, I'll say UV. So accelerated UV aging testing, you're going to have to do that in the lab. Otherwise, you're going to have a product that you're going to have to wait 20 years, as you sit and wait as it's, installed in your test house in your parking lot before you can launch that product. So I certainly believe that there's lab testing that can point you to, okay, this product's going to last a really long time. What I think can be, where the test can fail us or inaccurately representing what's really going to happen to a product once it's installed with other products, right?
Yeah.
So, I think what we try to do is, it goes back to the customer, is sort of the building pro engagement, is involve people very early in our prototyping phase. So, for example, we will install products real world on real projects. And after we've done an initial batch of testing, right? So, from a lab standpoint, this all sounds good, but let's put it on a real project. Let's see how it installs, get the customer feedback, put it in different areas or other geographies around the country. Is this going to perform the way that we've talked about it performing? And then we record all of that. So doing videos, photos, making sure that we're building the case that this stuff's going to work. And then, honestly, trying to partner with people. I know you guys are, familiar with Michael Maines and Ben Bogey, and trying to engage with some of the thought leaders in this space. If they can buy in and they understand, like, yep, this thing is cool. I've put it, I've sprayed it with a hose. I put it through all the infield testing. We can also, leverage those types of thought leaders in helping others feel comfortable that this is something that makes sense. They don't feel like a guinea pig, that I'm the first one trying this thing. And it's got kind of the stamp of approval from some leaders in the space that they look up to.
So when you're talking about envelope products, you're talking about things that need to last for decades at a minimum, right? Maybe a century. Like even the best testing could not would seem inadequate for something that's supposed to last so long.
Right, right.
So what do you do?
Yeah. So I think, what we try to do at Benjamin Obdyke is look for technologies for products that are also tested. So for example, the HydroGap, the house wrap, there's been years of building science research on non-woven technologies, right? So the house wrap itself is a non-woven. So if we're developing products with these specs that have already been specified, reviewed, tested by building science people that we trust, that also gives us even a great starting point from an R&D side. Like, typically we don't go down any technology road that hasn't already had some sort of vetting behind it. So we're also not starting completely from scratch. When we have the final product, well, these are the components in that product, and we can list these building science reports that say, yep, 1 millimeter drainage is the way to go. Diminishing returns after that. Non-woven house wrap, with 3 layers and a vapor perm between 10 and 20, that's the way to go. So we try to point to some of the building science that can also give us an indication of how this is going to perform over the long term.
Interesting. So how did you get into the building products business, and where did you get your interest in building science?
That's a great question. If if I had told my parents in high school that I was going to be in building science, building materials, they would have laughed at me. They'd be like, "No way, no way." So I went.
Why would they have found that unbelievable?
Unbelievable. I think I was always, I like working with my hands. I was always crafty, but I think in terms of like building a house, I don't know that they would have said, yeah, no, I don't really see where that interest lies. But from my initial interest going to school was graphic design. So my undergrad degree is graphic design, and felt that was a little isolating for my personality. I like to work with people. I'm more of a social person than typical designer. So I had a professor right out of school that was looking for someone in sales, and he's like, I feel like you like this marketing thing. I have a role that does overflow design. So if you want to keep the design thing, great. But I really need somebody in sales. So through that sales job, I networked my way into a marketing position at Certainty. So I met somebody, I was trying to sell them on, our services at the design firm. And he's like, there's this, if marketing is more of your thing, I know of this entry level job at Certainty. So I started my building materials career at Certainty in the commercial ceilings group, which I really enjoyed because it had a building science aspect in acoustics. So how acoustics affect indoor quality. There's an indoor air quality aspect to, sort of the drop ceilings. And so I feel like I could really sink my teeth into the science of that group. Ultimately, Benjamin Obdyke came knocking on my door, and I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to have to replace all this acoustic knowledge with, like moisture management, permeability and drainability and all these other things. So, um, to be honest, I really like the residential space more than the commercial. I think because I get to interact with the actual end users a lot more often than I ever did in the commercial ceilings of Certainty. But it's fun. I mean, even the whole family now, we drive down the street and if we see a competitor house wrap, so we go boo. It's a family affair now. So even my husband, who knows a little bit about house wrap, so it's fun.
Did you find like things you had to learn it all intuitive when you had to take on this new level of knowledge with regard to building science? Did it make sense to you?
Yeah, I would say I think the only one, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, is the vapor permeability question. I mean, of WRBs, I feel like that's a constant debate. Should it be high? Should it be low? Does it depend
Yeah.
on where you are? It's, there's a lot of question marks around there. But I would say in general, it's intuitive, right? If things don't have the opportunity to dry, then you're going to have rot and mold and moisture, like that part
I
of it.
wish I wish it was so intuitive for the rest of the folks building houses out there, right?
Yeah, but I think that's where, the burden is on you know,
Us.
yeah, us. The collective us, whether it's industry, educational resources like Fine Homebuilding or the manufacturers to help people to know how to do it the right way and educate.
Coming from, let's say, not ground zero, but you had to learn a lot of stuff. What were the most useful things for you to get up to speed? And did your company help you get there, or is that something you had to figure out on your own?
Now, the Benjamin Obdyke, in terms of institutional knowledge, we have people that have been with the company for 35 plus years. And one of our values is really circles around intellectual curiosity, asking questions. So we actually, when we hire people, we look for people that want to keep learning, and that's really a passion. So on the other side of that, we have people in the organization that are really passionate about being a mentor and make sure they're teaching the rest of us who have no knowledge about these things. And that can be infectious, right? When you see somebody who's so passionate and talks about, how we need to do a better job of within the EC38 testing drainage efficiency. Like, there's a better way to do this. When you see somebody talk so passionately about something, you're like, this is hard not to buy into, right?
I'm already interested.
Yeah, and I feel like it starts to feel like a cult at a certain degree, but that's what makes it fun. So I think the resources are there internally, but we also are really focused on bringing outside people in. So, I hate to toot your horn, Patrick, but, we point people to the Fine Homebuilding podcast to learn, Green Building Advisor. We send people to Building Science Summer Camp, which, I know you guys are familiar
That's
with.
why I had you on the show, Tara.
You're just trying to get it. Summer camp. No, these resources are out there. We also don't want to be so insular that we're only talking to each other, right? We're pulling in those other resources to, again, sort of foster the learning. It's not all from inside our four walls. It's, making sure you're reading, listening, getting to shows, hopefully, again, at some point.
Yeah, totally.
Conferences, yeah.
So, You know, perhaps better than most people, given where you live, why are there so many houses rotting in our country? Why do we have these recurring envelope failures? And your part of the country, it's stucco, right? But they're all everywhere has problems. Why do we keep getting these things wrong? What is going on?
It's if I was going to say it in one phrase, is that, I feel like the code minimum hasn't kept up with the technologies that exist and this focus on being a house being as tight as possible, right? So the energy efficiency codes have been improved, but there's consequences, unintended consequences to making things tighter and tighter, and that means that moisture can't escape, right? So a lot of what we talk about, at Benjamin Obdyke with product development is, what are those future unintended consequences going to look like? What are these things that, code change is typically very slow. There's a lot of resistance to the actual codes being changed to keep up with these new technologies. So how do we develop products that solve the problem? How do we educate people on doing it right? I mean, your point about the stucco, that's left over from the 90s, and the stucco mix has changed, but we can't just blame the stucco, right? I live in a 1949 Cape Cod with cinder blocks, and it's not energy efficient at all. It's I feel the breeze. It's
Yeah.
very dry, but we haven't talked about how do we make things tight but also keep them dry, and that's what we're seeing across the country.
But I think you'd agree that the major problems are not related to air tightness. They are just like bad flashing details and
Yes,
poor envelope details. Like, is that still a I mean,
that's absolutely still a problem. I mean, if we come down to installation, yeah, we still see reverse flashed house wrap. I mean, things as simple as like you're filtering the water down into your courses of house wrap. This is like basic stuff. So, I mean, I think there definitely is a burden on all of us on how do we figure out better ways to train the next generation, and making sure that we have that these jobs also are something that you can make a career out of, that are worth spending time and money
learning.
learning and how to do it right. We definitely don't see as many apprenticeship programs anymore. So I mean, that's definitely a burden for me on our marketing team. Is we talk a lot about education, just how to do things right, how to flash a window properly. And now you have things like liquid applied, you're starting to come more into the residential channel, and like, wait, I could barely flash the window with regular straight flashing, and now you want me to like use a caulk
Goop.
gun and like
Yeah.
goop, and how do I do this? So there is a lot of installation, pitfalls, and it all comes back to knowing what you're doing. So I think from a manufacturer, from an industry standpoint, we need to do a much better job on how do we kind of teach the next generation, but also the generation that's out there that have done things the same way
Wrong for decades.
for decades, right? So it feels very overwhelming to feel like you have to, teach everyone how to do everything. But I think what I'm starting to really see, what gives me hope is, just even scrolling through our Obdyke Instagram, the information that's sharing in terms of best practices, and the people who are willing to be transparent with the fact that, hey, I tried this, didn't work. I experienced a failure. I had to up my game, and here's how I did that. I feel like there's a lot of goodwill and sharing on some of the social platforms now that, to be honest, I wasn't seeing 10 years ago when I started with Benjamin Obdyke.
That's good, because it's kind of a balance to so many of the horrible things you see on social media, right?
Yeah, I go to Instagram for hope for the building industry. I mean, I don't know if that's a little strange, I guess.
On the, in response to these like increase prevalence of envelope failures, I see a trend towards self-adhered WRBs, and I've heard a mixed bag. I've heard people say it's an awesome way to make a building weather tight. I've also heard people say they're a pain to work with. Mm-hmm. Why go to the trouble? And what's your experience with these products? Are they a pain to use? Are they effective? Are they worth the money?
Yeah. All good questions. So, and I think all comes down to trade-offs, right? So we would get the question all the time, for hydrogap, for example, like, how do I make this thing totally airtight? You got to tape all the seams, you got to seal the sill, but once you put the siding up, you're also putting a lot more
Holes in it.
fasteners.
Yeah.
You're putting holes in it, right? So the ability to achieve a pure, true 100% air barrier from the outside is very hard unless you're using something like a self-adhered product. So, previous to launching a self-adhered product, you know what, do all your sealing from the inside. It's a lot easier, and you could still do that, right? If you're not comfortable installing a self-adhered WRB, try to do as much sealing from the inside out as then your house wrap is your primary moisture barrier. Don't think of it as the air barrier. Do as much as you can from the inside. So where we see the self-adhered trend going is because you can achieve a true air barrier from the outside in, and it's sealing around all those penetration points once you install the siding, because it's almost impossible to do that with a regular WRB. It's not self-sealing around those fastener points. So, yeah, I mean, is there a learning curve? Do you need patience to install self-adhered? Yes, absolutely. It's a new technology. Hoping that it's not quite as difficult as doing something like a full liquid applied WRB. I mean, I don't know that the residential space is quite there yet.
Hmm.
Um, so is that a stepping stone to a full, fluid applied WRB system? Sure. I mean, I think that's probably the as tight as you're going to get when you're using a fluid applied.
Do you tell folks or do you have suggestions on when to use the self-adhered products versus a more conventional WRB? Is it strictly for air control, or is it also for extreme precipitation areas like the Pacific Northwest or coastal?
Right. Yeah. So we're always trying to consult on, what's the application, where is it located, what kind of overhangs. There's a lot of questions that go into where we would direct someone to the right product. So, there might be a situation where, we don't have um, we don't have right now a flat self-adhered WRB. So there could be somebody who calls us from, a coastal region, shore town, you're getting beat with, ocean wind driven rain all
Hmm.
the time. We might say, look, use the self-adhered WRB, but put a rain screen over it, because you also need that siding to dry. You're going to be really sealed in from that self-adhered WRB standpoint, but you also need the drying capacity. So, there's a situation where we'd probably point somebody to Home Slicker plus a product that we don't make.
Hmm.
For the self-adhered drainable WRB that we're in the process of launching, I mean, that's great air barrier, great drainage plane, but it's not going to give you the drying capacity of a rain screen. So there's still areas where we'd say, you know what, use a regular WRB with a rain screen, or use a self-adhered WRB with a rain screen. That hydrogap self-adhered is not going to get it done for you. We would really like to see rain screen. So it's also, what's the budget look like? I know we hate getting into the budget conversations, but unfortunately that's
Every
something
project has a budget. I always say it.
right. So, are you sacrificing exterior protection or the level of protection for, the granite countertops in the kitchen? I mean,
Those
these
are
are
real
those
questions,
are
right?
real questions. I mean, of course, we're biased and we say, well, you want to protect everything that's on the inside. So, don't spend the money on that crazy stuff. But, you
Well,
know,
that granite countertop's not going to care when it gets drenched in rain, right?
right. Exactly. Exactly.
What do you think the biggest challenges going forward are for Benjamin Obdyke and other building product businesses in the next few years and coming decades?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've hit on it already. It's the education. It's making sure that we have all of the resources for our end users to be successful, and making sure that we have that content in a variety of different ways, right? Videos, great installation instructions, going into all the details. I think trying to get out of our four walls of our office, and actually getting to job sites and meeting with contractors on what the needs are and how to do things better. I think that's our big hurdle right now is, keeping up with the codes, the trends, the technologies that are, that touch our products, making sure that we're up to speed there, and then making sure that we can disseminate that information to our end users in a way that's helpful.
On that subject, so I do this a lot when I talk to building product manufacturers. I go to their website and I look for instructions. I look for technical documents. I look for training materials. You guys do a pretty good job. Is that part of your responsibility at the company? Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
you should be proud. So I looked up Ridge Vent as an example, WRBs, drainage products. You guys include compatible products in your instructions, which I find to be very interesting. That must be a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. But, like I said, we try to play well with others is something that we say a lot. So, for example, when James Hardy comes out with like new guidelines on, what to use with their siding, we need to know, okay, is this in a geography that they require drainable house threat, that they require rain screen? Do they require a certain type of rain screen? Those questions ultimately come to us. And to make sure that our internal team is trained and up to speed, it's hard, but it's something that we feel as a differentiator as Benjamin Obdyke, that, we are knowledgeable. We want people to come back to us as a resource, because that also then feeds, the product pipeline to be just totally transparent. Like if somebody's having an issue and we're seeing the same issue pop up again and again and again, maybe that's an opportunity to provide a solution.
Yeah. Amen. This is my favorite part of the show. So can you tell me about your own house? And do you have any new or lingering envelope or building science problems that you're willing to share?
Wow. Well, I think I already said 1949 Cape Cod. I mean, in the winter, the downstairs is 10 degrees hotter than the upstairs. And in the summer is 10 degrees hotter upstairs than it is downstairs. So I feel like my entire house is a building science issue right now, deep energy retrofit, and we've explored some options, and I think, maybe we're blissfully ignoring it right now. We do love our house. To put the sort of deep energy retrofit into place, we may as well buy a new house.
So where is your thermal barrier? Capes are notoriously difficult to make energy efficient because you have this kind of in-between space behind the knee wall on the upstairs. So have you climbed back there and done some air sealing or anything?
We have not. There's some ancient insulation that I'm almost worried to disturb. Like, I don't even know if I'd want to pull it out at this point for health reasons, but I guess we can hire somebody to do that. But yeah, we got our roof redone. We've added some ventilation in the roof system because it was a combination of a ridge vent, a gable vent, and no intake. So we've added intake, actually like an intake vent a little bit, like maybe 18 inches off the edge for intake. And then, Benjamin Obdyke ridge vent, of course, I have.
I was going to ask you whose ridge vent you were using.
I use the extractor vent X18. So the maximum amount of net free area that we offer with a baffled product that met the Owens Corning warranty. So we put an OC roof on. But adding the intake, I mean, that wasn't something that the roofing contractor had done before. So again, I have connections. It's like, no, I think this makes more sense. Let's put some intake, because to your point, it's hard to access the soffit in this style. So it's helped a little bit, but ultimately I think we'd have to do something more drastic, like completely seal the attic to make a real difference. And
I think you got to climb up there and start doing some air sealing.
You guys want to do a case study? You have some money laying around for that?
I got to ask, so what kind of WRB is on this house? I'm assuming it's felt paper.
Yeah. So there's one side that has, so our second floor, at the highest point of the house, so it's 3 stories. We actually have a walkout basement, so it's very high up. there's siding up there. It's aluminum. It is something we'd like to replace at some time. I'm assuming there's felt paper back there, but otherwise I think it's, the cinder block with the knuckle space with the brick, and there's probably nothing else back there.
Well, just think of all the opportunity for improvement, right?
That's right. Yeah, if only I had endless funds.
Cash.
Yeah, to make that.
So what is the short list of things you want to do to the house, or are you happy with it right now?
I think we're pretty happy. I mean, we've talked about, is there a way to do mini splits upstairs? We have a neighbor with a very similar footprint, and they put mini splits in a couple years ago. They were liking that. I still don't think it solves like the holistic. I mean, we might be more comfortable.
Yeah. But you're going to be wasting energy too. Yeah.
Right. We still have the same issue of wasting, energy. So I think, at some point we'll get serious about sealing a little bit more and trying to make some smaller improvements. But yeah, I mean, I think even something as, tankless water heater, like I think like that sort of thing, I think would make a lot of sense for.
Do you have gas?
It's electric.
Okay. Do you have gas service in the neighborhood?
That's a good question. Not sure.
Yeah. They're hard to make the dollars work if you don't have gas service. Yeah.
All right. Well, you just, let's cross that one off the list.
Glad to help, Tara.
Come on. This is supposed to be, like hopeful conversation. Dashing my dreams, Patrick. Come on.
It's been so nice having you on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Was it as enjoyable as you thought it might be?
Absolutely. That and then some. Only because
Awesome.
Jeff's here, though.
I know. It's really what makes it all work, right?
That's right. I love it.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thanks to Tara for joining us, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your questions, comments, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Thanks so much, everybody. Stay safe and happy building.
Thank you.